This is Risky Women Radio, a show to connect, celebrate and champion women in risk, regulation and compliance, sharing insight and perspective from the most influential members of our global Risky Women network on the latest developments we need to think about, the challenges we should all talk more about, and the innovation we are most excited about in governance, risk and compliance. Bringing together the hundreds of senior women professionals already connected with a new emerging group of leading women and men. I'm Kimberley Cole, your Chief Risky Woman.
That's been a major change for me, is understanding that you're making decisions that don't just affect your firm and its customers. You're making decisions that absolutely have the potential to impact a really broad range of stakeholders and have a very lasting impact on a number of people and your community.
Welcome to Risky Women. Cathie Armour is one of Australia's leading corporate lawyers in the Australian financial sector. She's one of only 4 commissioners of the Australian Securities and Investment Commission, and she's also a member of Chief Executive Women. Cathie's direct responsibility at ASIC is markets regulation, and she's going to tell us more on that today. She has also sponsored some impressive programs around diversity, equality, and access to financial markets for both Torres Strait Islanders and also for women. Let's welcome Risky Woman, Cathie Armour. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, that's a pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. So we'll start off because you've had a very interesting career. So I'd love to sort of give us a walkthrough and some of your career highlights to date and how you ended up at the Commission and any highlights along the way.
Okay, well, I'll just stick with the highlights rather than the lowlights, which I think we all inevitably have in our careers. My career started as a lawyer, and I had the pleasure of working in Sydney and a stint in New York in the era of the first Wall Street movie, so in the 1980s, and that was a fantastically interesting event for me, a period of time to be working there, and really introduced me, I think, to the interesting world of financial markets in a way that I wouldn't have been introduced if I'd stayed in Australia. I came back to Australia, continued in the legal profession for a little while, but then left and joined JP Morgan as their general counsel, and had in Australia, mind you, and had the pleasure then of doing a range of different jobs at JP Morgan, and that's where I really saw the value of risk and risk professionals in an organisation. I had the opportunity to work in compliance, but at one stage I had a Chief Operating Officer job and had the various mid-office and operations teams reporting to me, as well as being responsible for legal and compliance. So it was very interesting. We went through the JP Morgan Chase Manhattan merger. Again, fascinating to see how a large organisation, even when you're in a relatively small office in a country, how it adjusts to such a significant change. That was fascinating. And after that, I joined Macquarie. I was very, very excited to be joining an Australian headquartered organisation. I am someone who's very committed to living in Australia and to us having really fantastic financial markets in Australia. I think that's an important national asset, and I think we actually do that. We have very effective markets here, and I had a wonderful time working at Macquarie. It was for 11 plus years. I was an executive director for one of their divisions, which is Macquarie Capital, and in that job we really built a legal and compliance and operating risk team from a sort of humble beginnings to a team that operated across all the geographies we worked in, and it was fantastically interesting role. We not only conducted a financial services business, but we actually made principal investments. So we acted a little bit like more traditional private equity firms. So we bought businesses that had significant operating risks associated with them. So at one stage, we we had a significant equity holding in an explosives business, or we had a significant equity holding in a ferry boat shipping business. So there are a range of different businesses, but all sorts of different operating risks as a result of those investments, and that was very fascinating activities to be involved in. So I've thoroughly enjoyed that. I joined ASIC in 2013 as a commissioner because I actually had a fantastic career in financial services and had the benefit of seeing how important effective financial services are, both to our national economy but also our global economy. And I felt that I needed to put back, if you like, into the sector, and I could best do that if I was working in a regulatory role. So that's my journey.
So that's really interesting, and we love to sort of share all of these different journeys that certainly women have had, because I think it's important for then sort of our emerging community to understand the different paths you can take to get to different opportunities. And so what's been the biggest change sort of being from the private sector to the public sector?
So I must say I couldn't recommend a stint in the public sector to anyone, and at any stage of your career. It's a terrific environment to really learn a different perspective, and I think that's been a major change for me, is understanding that you're making decisions that don't just affect your firm and its customers. You're making decisions that absolutely have the potential to impact a really broad range of stakeholders and have a very lasting impact on a number of people and your community. So it's a very challenging area for the seriousness, if you like, of the decisions. At the same time, intellectually, the problems, if you like, or questions that you need to think about and the direction you'd like to take your organisation is just so fundamentally interesting, and it's really very challenging but very satisfying place to work.
Excellent. And so as this will be going out more globally, can you tell us more about the role of ASIC, the importance it has to the Australian market, and then maybe also globally, how ASIC sort of interacts with other regulators and stuff? So
ASIC is the Australian Securities and Investments Commission. So we are Australia's integrated corporate financial markets, financial services and consumer credit regulator. So that means we are an equivalent, if you like, to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the CFTC in the US, combined with the various state corporation Secretary of State functions, or the FCA and Companies House in the UK. If you think about those sorts of combinations of organisations, that's where ASIC sits. And we work very closely. Business is a global phenomenon. It's gone are the days where organisations can just exist within national boundaries. And as a result, we work very closely with all of our regulatory counterparties globally, and also the other financial services regulators in Australia. So we have really quite a network, and it's both a support network, so we're helping each other with common problems, but it's an information network. We borrow ideas from each other. We'll learn from each other. We in Australia, we were looking a number of years ago at whether or not we were comfortable with the way dark pools which were operating. And one of the things that we looked at was how this Canada was looking at the issues, and we actually effectively borrowed an initiative that Canada had just introduced it here, and it has proven to be a really suitable initiative for our market. And we do that quite frequently in a number of areas, but that's just one example. So we chat with each other, we learn, we collect intelligence, we we bond over common problems, and we think about the best ways to deal with issues. We like the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, like many of our global counterparts, actively participates in IOSCO, which is the International Organisations of Securities Commissions, and we really value that participation and cooperation with our sister agencies.
And where would you feel that, I guess, Australia's leading the way, and that, you know, people are coming to us for the best practice?
Well, now I must make a disclaimer at the start of my answer to this question, because as a commissioner, my day-to-day responsibility is for regulation of our Australian financial markets. Right. So if you think about our securities exchange, our over-the-counter markets, and I think Australia is, it just so happens, I think we're leading the way in some aspects of our markets regulation. We have our equities markets are reasonably clean. That is, they trade with a limited amount of information asymmetry. So there's anyone who wants to invest in an Australian listed security should have a high degree of comfort that these are fair and transparent markets, and I think we do a good job there. I think our corporate governance systems, again, are relatively world best practice. Obviously, there's lots of things we'd all set ourselves a bar of improving from time to time, but generally, world's best practice, we have a good system of accountability, and we really, I think the Australian business community is working hard at improving that system as we go. So we are doing things in that area. One area that ASIC, I believe, is a real leader in is its, beyond its market supervision, is in its financial capability work. So we are the agency responsible within Australia for building Australians' capacity and capability to understand their financial situation. And we have a particular website that is called Money Smart that provides easy-to-use financial capability information. So whether you want to test whether you can comfortably manage a mortgage, whether your superannuation, your retirement investment is sensibly tracking, whether a particular product is dangerous for you, you can go onto this website and there's information that's produced in a way that's easy to digest and really well focused. So that's an area that we work on quite diligently, and we have also ensured that financial literacy is embedded in the school curriculums together with the various education departments. We've trained over half the teachers in Australian schools on ensuring that this occurs, and then we've developed very good targeted material that for particular groups in the community who may have special needs on financial capabilities. So for Indigenous Australians, for example, we have material that is targeted for their needs. We've recently done another campaign on women's financial needs. So that's an area I think ASIC really has done fantastic work in.
That's fantastic, Cathie. Yeah, I wasn't aware of a lot of those things, and I think it's a really important area. You know, you hear a lot about financial inclusion, and certainly educating in the schools, I think, is brilliant because you don't hear a lot of that in most countries. Yeah. So that is one of the other areas that we like to talk about is, and I know when you came and spoke to the Risky Women Network last year, I guess, we spoke about how ASIC was promoting diversity and inclusion. So can you tell us more about, you know, how you are driving, you know, it's still a challenge everywhere, more women on boards, more women in executive leadership. What's ASIC doing to try to get more women?
Thanks. Well, this does seem a bit of a perennial challenge, doesn't it? Like any employer, I think we've realised that the more voices around the table focusing on any particular problem, the better the outcomes that we'll have. That teamwork is the best way to do a good job, and really teams that have people who are think the same and do the same are not the most effective teams. So we are very keen to ensure that we're a diverse workplace. As far as gender diversity goes, we have had in place for a number of years targets for women to be promoted to our senior leadership levels, and we are making progress. I have to say, we'd like the progress at the most senior level to be faster than it has been, but we have been making progress, which is heartening, and I think we're seeing this progress because we also measure, and I hope others are doing this. We also measure the gender pay gap, and one of the areas that you can see progress is when you've managed to promote women to the next level, but because they've just come into that next level, you end up with a bit of a gender pay gap unintentionally at that level. And it's quite heartening to see when you break down what it's causing a gender pay gap, to see that actually it's because you're being successful at promoting women to the next level. So then you know you need to focus very long and hard on ensuring that those women are getting the opportunities to step up in their pay as appropriate on all occasions. So I think those sorts of things are really important. So, but we not only focus on our gender diversity, we are focusing on cultural diversity, diversity from a whole range of different groups. We just think we are a better organisation the more representative we can be of the broader community. So that's how we're trying to deal with those sorts of issues.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I think everyone wants to get ultimately to represent the community and the customers that they're serving, but also to drive for diversity of thought, which without having a mix of people around the table, you can't achieve. But no, that's really interesting, and I think the gender pay gap is a really hot topic at the moment, a challenging one because the figures that are coming out are saying that there's huge gaps, but as you say, the devil's in the detail, and it's very difficult to just take those headline numbers and not get into what else do you need to do and why does this exist. Right, I'd love to just quickly now jump in. One of the things that I still feel that we hear a lot more opinions, whether it's op-ed pieces or it's television or other forms of media, we don't get enough female perspectives on some of the topics that are going on. So it'd be great to get into a couple of hot topics if we could. So I'd love to know a bit more, if you can give us an update on what's most exciting in the regtech space at the moment, and anything that ASIC's doing as well that would be interesting.
Well, this is an area which I think is a good example of global regulatory cooperation. ASIC, like most of its regulatory counterparts, is quite excited about the opportunities that new technologies are bringing to financial services, and in particular to assisting financial services firms, or any firms really, to more efficiently deal with their regulatory obligations, which is sort of what is now very cutely called regtech. We actually did some consultation late last year on what is useful for us to do in the in relation to regtech. How can we be facilitative? How can we assist people? We held a regtech meetup last year to hear from industry and to run through some of the ideas that industry has, where we have an innovation hub, which is a gateway, if you like, for startup businesses to come to ASIC and get some assistance with understanding what they need to do if they would like to operate in the financial services sector. So startup businesses don't have a lot of capital. They don't have a lot of money to spend on lawyers or other advisors. So our innovation hub very much focuses on providing some senior level advice to a new startup on how to approach us efficiently and effectively. And we've also broadened out the focus of our innovation hub so that we can assist some of the startups in the regtech area as well. So we can help share ideas about what might be useful from our perspective in relation to regtech. We are also an investor in regtech in the sense of, not in the sense of that we've got a lot of money to invest as an equity participant, but in the sense of we need to use regtech just like anybody else does. So, for example, we have a real-time equities and futures market surveillance system that is we think is a leading edge surveillance system where we program alerts. We can run a whole lot of analytics to see whether or not there are problems in how the market's operating. Pretty standard example of regtech. We now have developed some quite a lot of technology skills, if you like, but also solutions, so that we can better respond on enforcement matters. So we actually have adapted a commercial solution to help us mine our own databases, but also general law enforcement and publicly available databases to ensure that we get all the relevant information we need on various enforcement matters. So we use the technology as well.
So you've got big data, you've got artificial intelligence, you've got machine learning, you've got it all. Very exciting, really.
I wish we could say we've got it all. Like everybody else, we're just we're experimenting and trying things out and comparing notes with our regulatory counterparts, and also quite happy to, where we can, compare notes and give ideas to people working in the sector, and to work with organisations. So, for example, we've been working with the Australian Government Data 61 group to look at various technology solutions that would help us with our regulatory job. So we're very, very interested in doing that sort of thing.
So what about more broadly on the just generally your views on the changing regulatory environment? I mean, it's always seen as there's so much regulation happening. What's your views on how things are developing? What's the kind of focus maybe just for, the year ahead or maybe a bit longer?
Okay, so there's a couple of themes from my perspective. The first one is technology, and this is really, financial markets, financial services have had technology solutions for ages and for probably forever in some respects. I think there was trading in coffee houses, then by pigeons, all those various things. So new technologies is nothing new, but the pace of change raises real issues. And from my perspective, one of the things that we're very much concerned about is how well are firms dealing with the pace of change? How robust are their operational systems? Are they dependent on a whole lot of a spaghetti of legacy systems, which to some degree we all are, but are firms really cognizant of the risks inherent in that process? So that's one area of particular focus for us. We have been working in our supervisory side on looking at firms' cyber resilience. We're very interested in that. We put out a report late last year that just summarised some of the results that we have found, and I know this is an area of interest to all of the agencies that participate in IOSCO. So that's an area of great interest. But one of the other areas that's piquing our concern is also the impact of technology on financial crime, and really how does the new types of technologies available, how do they facilitate the traditional financial crimes, fraud, market manipulation or market misconduct, those sorts of things? How are they facilitated by the new technology. So we've developed our capability to surveil the dark web. We're looking at offending that is sort of driven by new technologies. You probably recall that earlier, I think it was earlier last year, the ASIC announced some charges against some individuals who weren't located in the US. They were located out of the US, but they were charged with market misconduct offences because they had managed to hack into the systems of law firms in the US who had large mergers and acquisitions businesses, and then were trading based on the information they obtained from that sort of activity. So that's an area that's quite interesting to us. We know as a regulator, people have got to be able to participate, whether it's the equities markets, futures markets, the established markets, or the over-the-counter markets. We know that they've got to be able to participate in those markets in a much more confident manner, and really feel that the technology is supporting open and transparent markets, not actually a gateway for criminal activity. So we know we've got to be there looking at that. So that's some of the areas that particularly the markets area at ASIC is focusing on. More broadly, of course, we are very focused on outcomes for consumers, and this is probably more of a domestic issue, but we at the moment we have a Royal Commission underway in Australia into the financial services industry, and its first lot of hearings were focusing on what were perceived to be poor outcomes for consumers in relation to consumer credit, home mortgages and insurance businesses. And we have been doing some work over the last number of years, and obviously will continue to do, about making sure that obligations that firms that provide consumer finance are being addressed, and that there's the expectations of consumers when they deal with a large financial firm are sort of clearly, everyone understands what the bargain is, what the arrangement is. That's one of the things that we're particularly focused on.
It's an incredibly broad spectrum.
Yes.
And everything from financial crime and then protecting the consumers at the other end. And as you say, you've got technology that can be used for good, but technology that can be used for evil as well. So it's a challenge. We're very focused at Thomson Reuters on the financial crime element as well. Connecting, celebrating and championing women in risk regulation and compliance, Risky Women Radio takes an intimate look at the rants and revelations of the top women shaping the debate and the industry. So, our Risky Women rants and revelations section. So, if we maybe start with your revelation of the kind of one thing that you wish that you knew then that you know now. So what would be that piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
Oh, that's easy. It's about speaking up and protecting your career, owning your career, making sure you're actively promoting yourself and your career. Don't wait for somebody to make an opportunity for you. It's make the opportunity for yourself. Just make everybody else that you work with accountable for your success, but secretly you need to own it. And I've had a wonderful career. I've enjoyed it very much, but I wouldn't have stayed as long doing some of the things that I did if I was a much smarter Cathie.
Fantastic. I love it. And then what's your rant? So what's things that's really annoying you that you wish you could change or make things go faster?
So there's a long list. I'm sure everyone has a long list. But speaking as a woman who made her career sort of through legal compliance risk areas, I do think one thing that I really would like us as a community of risky women to do is to stop conflating the notion of being a woman, likely to have children, likely to have caring responsibilities, with how your career is going and how you're perceived in the workplace. We need to separate the two ideas. It's a social and important social problem that employers and our community needs to grapple with: how we look after our families, how we look after our elderly, how we look after the people who support them. That's an important issue, but it's not the same issue as how women progress in the workplace. It's just one of the ingredients that goes to that, just like whether you can operate a computer effectively and a whole range of other things. And I think it's really important whenever women get together and talk about career options and career opportunities and the things that they need to do or would like to do, that they just focus on their skill set and the outcomes that they want to see for that career. Everyone knows we'll all have demands on our time because of our families or our personal situations, but let's put that in that separate box and force employers to deal with that. It's just as relevant for men as it is for women often, not always, but often, and we need to start to separate the two, because I don't think we've done ourselves a service by conflating the two ideas. So that is one rant I have. But more generally, I just think we are in a really terrific situation now. We've had a financial crisis that's sort of gone by. Generally, we're coming out from the other end of it. Financial services firms need to go through the exercise of rebuilding trust, so demonstrating that they are trustworthy, important parts of our social fabric. And I think women in risk are really well placed to do this. And, this is a time where you can actually really say the opportunity is here for me to build a career where I'm going to help you become the trustworthy organisation that you need to be successful. So I think that if we can, a sort of a rant is, let's start talking positively. There's a lot of negativeness about regulation, but actually, just from being in this job for 4 years, I've seen that we've often have to bring financial services firms kicking and screaming to the table on things that they know they need to do. If there's been a mistake, you need to fix it and remediate your customers effectively. You shouldn't have to be brought kicking and screaming. And really, I think women in risk are well placed to help firms overcome that sort of trust deficit and position themselves well for the future.
Brilliant. Great opportunities for our risky women. Risky Women is a vibrant network at the centre of a global community in a rapidly growing, evolving and influential industry. Given the continued pace of change, our rapid fire round revisits the most pressing topics to share ideas and offer listeners new perspectives. Okay, so Cathie, now our rapid fire round to end on. So get ready. These are punchy answers to killer questions for you. So, one word from you to sum up governance, risk and compliance from your perspective.
Opportunity.
Excellent. I always say I love the Chinese symbol for risk because it is the same symbol for risk and opportunity.
Oh, wow. That's good.
Top risk for 2018.
Technology adaptiveness.
Cure for the cost of compliance.
Compliance is an asset. Being well regulated is an asset. Stop talking about it as a cost. It's an asset. You're one of the things that makes your firm valuable. Change the language. That's my cure.
Biggest technology impact on compliance and risk.
Oh gosh, it's hard not to say everything. But I think it actually is probably the legacy systems. The need to continually, your compliance and risk often don't receive. They're often not the people who get the first technology dollars in the firm to spend on their own activities, but somehow have to make the most out of limited access to technological resources to scan legacy systems. So I just think that the failure to address the legacy systems and the firms' inability to move to less bespoke style technology outcomes is probably the biggest risk for compliance and risk.
And your outlook for the year ahead? Optimistic, pessimistic, uncertain?
So I'm optimistic. I think, yes, there'll be ups and downs. Yes, the interest rate world is changing, all of those things. But wow, pretty good opportunities, aren't there? We operate in a really interesting global environment. We are all from a variety of markets which have their own strengths, and we really are at a high point in cooperating generally and coordinating with each other. And I think if we can just exploit those opportunities, have a sense of generosity towards each other, I think it'll be a wonderful year ahead. It can be a wonderful year ahead for financial services.
So, Cathie Armour, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for being a risky woman.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this exciting episode of Risky Women Radio to connect, champion, and celebrate women in risk regulation and compliance. I'm Kimberley Cole, based in Hong Kong. For more information on the Risky Women Global Network, head to our website in the episode notes, and please be part of the ongoing conversation by subscribing to this podcast, connecting with us at Risky Women on Twitter, or even reaching out to me directly by email.